Hey everybody, welcome back to Drug Talk. As always, I'm your host, Garrett Campbell. So as I mentioned in my last video, a couple people in the comments section of my videos have asked me to touch more on mental health and share my experience with bipolar disorder. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what depression feels like, as in my last video I talked about what a manic episode feels like. And again, I'd like to mention that I do enjoy making these videos as a way to connect with you better and kind of open up about my experience with illness and with medication and show that I'm not just a pharmacist talking about medication, but I do use them myself as well. As I mentioned in my last video about mania, everything that I'm going to say in this video just comes from personal experience. It doesn't come from the literature. So if you read about depression on your own, you may read things that are explained differently than what I explain here today. It's also important to keep in mind that while I discuss depression, I'm discussing it from a bipolar standpoint. So if somebody watching this video has unipolar depression, then they may have a different experience than what I explain. So the first thing I'd like to mention with depression, very similar to what I mentioned with mania, is that depression is not simply a switch that is flipped on or off very quickly. For me, it seems to happen in stages. So you don't go from feeling normal in a normal state one day and then wake up the next day fully depressed. It kind of happens, like I said, in stages, with things getting progressively worse along the way. I mentioned in my last video that I had 5 manic episodes, and after having so many episodes, I kind of notice things that happen early on, and I can take necessary steps to prevent myself from becoming manic. And the same thing is true with depression for me. I've had 3, I guess, clinically depressed episodes in which suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation became an issue. And early on, there have been things that I noticed about myself that I still pick up on now, especially leading into the winter months when it seems to be an issue for me. So now I can use medications such as Wellbutrin or bupropion to help prevent myself from getting to that point of suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts and kind of stop things in the early stages. So early on in the course of depression, the first thing that I really notice about myself is low energy. You have a really big need for sleep. You wake up in the morning, the alarm clock goes off, you're definitely hitting snooze a couple times, you don't want to start your day, you're very pessimistic, your outlook on life is negative, and you just really don't want to do the things that normally make you happy in life. During these early stages, I'm still able to go to work, I'm still able to have conversations with friends and family, and I still do engage in the regular activities that I would normally do, but I just don't feel good about it. I'm not excited about doing them. Now, after feeling this way for a couple weeks, I would usually progress to the next stage of depression, where anxiety seems to come in and play a big role in my life, especially social anxiety. So personally, I'm a very social person. I enjoy hanging out with friends. I enjoy hanging out with family. But at this stage, the anxiety that I have seems to be almost what people are thinking about me. If I'm in a conversation with somebody, again, feeling very pessimistic about life, I may think that they have a negative outlook towards me because at this point my self-confidence seems to kind of decrease and almost go away entirely, and the anxiety just really takes over. So this is when I would stop doing the things that I normally do. So like I said, in the early stages, I'm not enjoying doing the things I normally do, but I still get myself to do them because I know that things have to be done. In this stage, I start to withdraw from friends, withdraw from family. I may lay in bed just in the dark, wanting to be alone, wanting to not really think about life and not engage with other people. Now, once I get to this stage, this is where I may start missing work. So for myself personally, again, about October is the time where I start to feel the depression set in, and then moving into November and December, it does get really, really bad for me. So this winter was probably the worst bout of depression I've had, and I did have to use Wellbutrin, an antidepressant, which did help me. But once I get into this stage, like I said, so for me, this would be November, December. This is when I would start calling off work, saying I was sick, because the depression is holding me. It's really holding me in my bed. I can't get out. I can't start my day. And I just don't want to be around anybody. And if I was to be around somebody, the anxiety would peak, and I would have to kind of avoid the situation. I do wish that we lived in a world where I could simply call my employer and tell them I'm experiencing depression and I can't make it into work today because of my mental health. But we're just not really at that point in society. And like I discussed in my other video, I've lost jobs in the past due to mental health when they found out about my diagnosis. And yeah, we're just not at that point yet. So unfortunately, I would have to say I'm feeling sick today. I can't make it into work. Now, as things progress, things just keep getting worse and worse. For me personally, if I'm not medicated with an antidepressant, it's just the sliding scale just keeps going down and more negative outcomes occur. So oftentimes when I wake up in the morning, again, may call off work, I would stay in bed, and I find a lot of times I fall into this vicious cycle where I'm in bed and I'm very tired, but I'm too hungry to fall asleep, and I'm too tired to get up and make food. And this just spirals and spirals. My stomach will be growling. There were times where I was laying in bed and I started to gag because my hunger was so intense. But the anxiety to even get out of bed and leave my bedroom to go to the kitchen to make food was so intense that there's actually one time where I had to call my sister. I was living away from where she was living at the time, so she couldn't come help me in person. But I called her, and I was in this vicious cycle that I discussed. Again, too hungry to go to sleep, too tired to get up and make food. And she was telling me, like, Garrett, you have to get up. You have to go to the kitchen. I'm going to talk you through making a sandwich and taking each bite. And I couldn't get myself out. So she took me through steps. And again, this is coming from a person. Like, I'm a very outgoing person. Did pharmacy school, went through the military, like top athlete at basic training. Like, I'm the type of person that kind of like a go-getter, you would say. But in this state, I couldn't do anything for myself. She had to talk me through sitting up in bed, putting my feet on the floor, standing up, taking steps to get to the kitchen, opening the fridge. I had to tell her what food I seen in the fridge. She told me what to take out, how to make a sandwich, talked me through taking every bite of the sandwich, and then got me back in bed. And again, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she was at work, so I was at home alone, and all I could do was really call somebody. Now, it is very fortunate, I should say, that I have such a good support system that I could reach out to somebody and they could give me the assistance that I needed. There was another instance when I was going through, again, this phase of depression where I was living alone and I needed to go get groceries, and I pulled into the Walmart parking lot, and just looking at the building, picturing going in and having these potential interactions with people, I just couldn't get myself to do it, and I started having a panic attack just over going into Walmart to get groceries. Again, coming from myself, who's a go-getter, I'm a very social person, but in this state of depression, I was not myself. There was thoughts coming into my mind. Again, when I talked about mania, I talked about it being as a state of mind where thoughts come into your mind that are not your regular thoughts, but you consider these thoughts to be true and live life according to these thoughts. I look at depression in the same way, where in mania you may have grandiose thoughts. Again, I talked about getting to the point where you think you're God, you think you're the creator of the universe, all these different intense thoughts. With depression, you have the same intensity, but they're just in the opposite end. So rather than having these high energy thoughts and thinking you're God, thinking you're the creator of the universe, with depression, it's just the opposite. You think you're worthless. You think you should end your life. You think that people would be better off without you. All these thoughts come into your mind. These are not thoughts that I would usually have, but I consider them in that state to be true, and I lived my life accordingly. So again, I couldn't even get myself to go into Walmart to be around people because I thought I was so worthless. I just thought that I was just not deserving of the life I had. Another experience that I had, again, this is when the depression was very severe. I was living on the 31st floor of an apartment building at the time, and I was in that vicious cycle again in bed, too hungry to sleep, too tired to get up and make food. But I would get myself to go out on the balcony and stare over the balcony and picture jumping off and ending my life. When I got to that point, I kind of was lucky enough to recognize that those thoughts weren't my own, and that's not something that I would usually think of. Again, strongly considering ending my life at the time. I realized that they were scary thoughts, so I called my sister, and she told me to go right down to the hospital at the military base at the time to seek treatment. And I did that, and I'm very glad that I did, because in that state, you don't know what can really happen. Now, after getting treatment, when you're in this state of depression, the unfortunate part about the medication is that it does take quite some time, weeks, even up to a month, maybe longer, to get maximum benefit from the medication. So, like with mania, if I was having a manic episode and I took an antipsychotic, within days I would be kind of back to my regular state. But with depression, it's a lot harder to treat in terms of getting back to that normal state. Like I said, it could take weeks or even a month or more. So that's why with me leading into the future, when October rolls around, I'll start taking an antidepressant, just once daily, bupropion or Wellbutrin, to try to prevent myself from falling down into a pit of depression. Now, besides the medication, I do work with a psychologist every 2 weeks. Moving into the summer months, maybe every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks. But I do work with it very closely to try to dive into my past and kind of find out where this depression is coming from. Now, obviously, with bipolar disorder, there is a genetic component to it, and it may just be something that I have, whether I had traumatic events in the past or not. But we have kind of, through working with a psychologist, which I highly recommend, we did kind of pinpoint some things in my childhood things that I just never really got past or never really dealt with the emotions associated with the traumatic events. So the event for me was the loss of my mother. When I was 13, my mother passed away. And it was a very hard time, obviously. And I've never really dealt with that. I kind of got into substance abuse issues and just finding ways to escape from dealing with those emotions. So now that I don't use substances anymore, these emotions seem to come to the forefront more often. So we're kind of working together to deal with some of these thoughts and negative emotions that, again, weren't dealt with in the past when I was young. So it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward into the future. Like I said in my video about mania, I do feel like I've learned the tricks of the trade of how to prevent myself from becoming manic in the future. So now moving forward next year into October, like I said, it'll be interesting to see if I can prevent myself from having depression as well by using the correct medication at the correct time. And again, I really do want to mention that I'm very fortunate to have a great support system. That's very important, and great physicians that work with me closely. Family doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist, who all work with me to try to get me to that point where I can lead a steady life in terms of mood and kind of avoid having those, the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows, as it has been tough during a 5-year period. But I think that the more you experience it, the better you get at recognizing the early signs and the better chance you have of early prevention. All right, well, I guess that's all I'm going to talk about in this video today about depression. I just want to give you guys kind of the idea that for me, it seems to be something that happens in stages. When you get to the point where it's very intense, you can have some very traumatic experiences with it. And unfortunately, like suicidal thoughts and suicidal ideation can come into play. And just try to make that relation between depression and mania, how to me, both of them are states of mind where thoughts come into your mind that are not your regular thoughts, but you treat them as they are, and you live life according to those thoughts. It's just with mania, the thoughts are much different than with depression. But again, they're not your thoughts. They're thoughts that appear due to the diagnosis, and you treat them to be your own. All right, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Again, like I said, I really enjoy making these types of videos to spice it up from just talking about medication. But we'll see you next time. Take care.